at Torrey Pines State Natural Reserve, whose namesake, the Torrey Pine, grows here, as well as on a small island off of the coast of Ventura called Santa Rosa, and nowhere else in the world. The Torrey Pine was discovered in 1850 by an expeditionary group that came to survey the new state of California. It was Dr. C.C. Perry who discovered the Torrey Pine for science. It was, of course, well known to the Kumeyaay for many thousands of years before that. But he named it after his colleague John Torrey, who is a professor at Columbia University. They called it Pinus torreyana and gave it the nickname California's birthday tree. The Torrey Pines are not unlike some other conifers along the coast. Some call them paleoendemics or old natives. And really what that means is that they have very little genetic variation. And the Torrey Pine is considered to be essentially a clone here in its mainland habitat. And when you compare them to the Torrey Pines growing out on Santa Rosa, there is very little difference. But why do we have these Torrey Pines growing out here? It's very odd. There's not a lot of moisture out here. There's between about 10 and 15 inches of rainfall per year. And some think that perhaps the Torrey Pines are able to hold on in this very dry, arid, and very nutrient deficient habitat by wicking moisture out of the air when fog rolls in off of the Pacific. So the Torrey Pines has very few natural predators other than two species of beetle, one being Ips paraconfusus, the California five-spined engraver beetle, and another being the Red Turpentine Beetle, or Dendroctonus valens. Both of those beetles are native beetles, and they don't normally kill trees. We know that going back at least as far as the 1960s, we have some records of Torrey Pines being killed by bark beetles. Back then, there was a significant period of drought, particularly during the early to mid-60s. But then, back in the late 80s, we had an unusual windstorm that caused several dozen trees, mature trees, to blow over, and by them being left alone, produced extraordinary crop of bark beetles that then moved into other healthy stands of trees. That outbreak lasted for several years and killed upwards of 15% of the entire population. About 850 mature trees were killed. Most recently, however, we've had a series of years of below average rainfall that have led to areas in the park not having the moisture available in the soil that was available previously. So where we've seen tree loss in the last couple of years has typically been on very sandy knolls in the main reserve and also in the park extension. The way in which we try to best understand what's happening in the park with respect to bark beetles is we have a whole series of traps throughout the reserve, mostly in clusters of 3, because there is a synergistic effect. So 3 traps together will catch more beetles than 3 traps spaced apart. We bait those traps about every 2 to 3 months using pheromones that are specific to our particular species of Ips. And those traps are monitored weekly and are about the only way we can tell whether or not we should be concerned about the number of beetles we're seeing. The trees themselves don't give much of an indication in advance of them being killed by bark beetles that they're under any kind of stress. We're not trying to extirpate the beetles from the reserve. Like I said, they're naturally occurring here. They're native insects. But we are making a decision that the Torrey Pines, being as rare as they are, need to be preserved for future generations. Many people have recently wondered if the Torrey Pines maybe won't be able to make it through this drought and bark beetle infestation. And I've explained to them that because Torrey Pines and their bark beetle adversaries, if you will, have coexisted for such a long time that it's highly unlikely that the beetles would cause the ultimate demise of the Torrey pine. The Torrey pine has lived here and prevailed here under very difficult conditions over a very long period of time. And so unless something like an exotic disease or insect somehow were introduced in the park, we expect that these pars will live here long after we do.